session of the evening, Design Through Fashion. And to moderate this session, may I please request Mr. Jyoti Kamal, Managing Editor, News18, to be on stage as we welcome our guest, renowned designer Raghavendra Rathore. Ladies and gentlemen, huge round of applause. And before we hand over the stage to Jyoti Kamal, can we have the AV, please?
He comes from the Royal Family of Jodhpur, yet he has chosen to pursue dreams that were his own. From coding to design, to art, to business, to NFTs, he has always wanted to explore and master. Raghavendra Rathore is the modern royal who consistently digs history and then reinvents it to sync with a time and a world that has changed and is always changing. Even as he's making sure he gives back to communities, he's also striving to move them forward. He's the man who has refashioned the Bandhgala to take it to new pinnacles in fashion. Turning art into a science, and perhaps vice versa, is an underlying approach. Ladies and gentlemen, Raghavendra Rathore.
All right, Jyoti, over to you.
Thank you, Misha. Raghavendra ji from the Royal Family of Jodhpur, to have taken that step that took you into the world of design via the path of coding. I mean, so what really kind of got you there? You went to study science, you went to study coding, and then you got into design, and then that became the passion of your life, and you took off on that line. And thereafter, it's been a constant process of iteration, refining, iterating, refining, focusing on the Bandhgala, and then kind of making it an iconic style statement which has like gone global. So that takes a lot of effort, that takes a lot of thinking. So that journey, if one has to define it, how did it kind of meander to where we are today?
You know, well, thank you to you guys to have have me here. But I think we had a session earlier, and I was really opening up. But having seen such eminent speakers before me, I'll keep it very limited. So my journey started with trips to the village with my father, who was the MLA, and I think he brought the reckoning that India is changing. And when ceremonies would be happening in Jodhpur, my job was to make sure that everything was polished and tip-top. So the buttons on his achkan, which I always wondered, I said, why do people wear all this stuff? What is the story behind it? And he explained this to me very clearly, that this is actually not yours. You come from a family that has been privileged to take care of people who make this stuff. I'm talking about, this is before I even thought of design. So to me, ever since that, I think the idea of being a guardian of culture and being aware that taxpayers paid that money to create the jewelry for the families so that you look strong and your state looks very well. It sort of dawned on me very early that I think all this has to be recreated, which is what we do today. We actually do everything, and all the learning, I think, came from my couple of years with Mr. De La Renta, where my job really was to deal with the idea of luxury. So to sneak a fur jacket to Mrs. Astor, who places are named in New York, after going and giving a gift to Mrs. Kennedy at the pier, where Rajmata Gayatri Devi is sitting in the same table. Those interactions...
You said about giving it to Mrs. Kennedy, and like Oscar de la Renta was in that receiving line where he went up and said, "Hey, that's my dress." And she had to acknowledge it. Yeah, it's your... When you don't go up and say, "That's my dress."
No, I think my role really was to make sure the lunching ladies were happy. So a lot of PR and design was a real learning as to how do you build a brand. I mean, none of this really, I'm a Jodhpur boy. I went to Mayo College and then went back to Jodhpur. And suddenly I was in New York doing all this stuff. So to me, I think the idea of what my father said when I was a kid in the village that, look around and see that, do you think these people need anything? I mean, do you think? And that time there was no aspirations because there was no television. So the problem started when people realized that so much more can be actually acquired. And the aspirations started changing from a village to small towns to big cities. So to me, I think what's very important is to realize what are you making if you're a product manufacturer, or also to understand which segment are you talking about, because each segment has a different aspiration. And therefore, luxury sits into these lovely slots. So a fur jacket in New York was probably the ultimate uber luxury, because to have a one of its kind piece, and Oscar would tell me that there's lunch happening at the pier and there's 6 people, quietly go and give them all a bag and don't make sure, it has to be so discreetly done. And let them know it's from the brand, because we were putting the labels 5 minutes before the delivery. And it was actually the most unsustainable part of the company, and I unfortunately was the one, so to me, fur and Rajasthan just don't go eye to eye, but the learning of how to move around and be able to reevaluate what the idea of luxury to people was fascinating. And I think that's where it all came from, that I said, one day I just need to get that opportunity. And the opportunity came where my cousin, the Maharaja of Jodhpur, was celebrating 50 years of the palace. And he said,
Maharaja Gaj Singh.
Maharaja Gaj Singh. So he said, why don't you just get a couple of girls and do a show? So I said, I don't have a factory, I have nothing. I'm visiting my father, I'm going back. So anyway, the whole thing came about, and I think the show was a great success. And then the buyers just wanted the clothes there and then. So Tina Taliani, people who used to run the fashion system sort of changed the course of my life. And I think ever since we've been designing clothes. But we were a women's wear brand when we started, and now we are a men's wear brand.
Oscar de la Renta, you met him in an elevator. Did you kind of just...
So I used to work for Donna Karan, and everybody was in one building. Mm-hmm. So perpetually you would meet Mr. Ralph Lauren, and there was hardly 10 seconds or 15 seconds.
They were all in the same building?
All in the same building. It was called...
Why was that the case?
Because that's where the offices are, okay. 550 7th Avenue.
All right.
So if you had a job interview, that was a great place to go and start pecking. And mine happened in such a... and he asked me for a portfolio, and I went and showed. And he didn't remember that I used to intern earlier with him. So the point I'm making is that fate plays a big role, but I think to have that, the drive to do what you can do, and especially from a small town, I think the big challenge really was, how do you make a fashion brand in a small town? Or how do you let people know about a Bandhgala from Jodhpur? And not that I invented the Bandhgala, it's been there 1200 years before me, but the idea was to find a unique method and build a cultural storyboard around it. So to me, I think everything luxury is a story. If it's a good story, you don't need to do anything. And I think that's what people miss sometimes, that they land up using resources to build a story which is artificial. It needs to come from the heart. And I think it's very important that we recognize that in this platform.
It's a story, it's a creative process, it's visualization, it's trying to figure out what all can you do with what you plan to kind of focus on, like the Bandhgala. The Bandhgala in itself has so many elements that you can focus on, which you do. I mean, like for example, you even make them funky with maybe like photographs of movie stars, which is stitched on the inner side, so that you lift it and you look and it's like different on the inside. So that's where you can kind of play with it. You were talking about buttons and stuff on jackets and things, but that's something that you have really kind of homed in on, that the components of what go into clothing and fashion. Each component itself requires a lot of attention to detail to make the final product kind of really come out very well. Literally the buttons, literally the scarves, literally the shoes, everything kind of put together. So is that something that you have in you, that attention to detail, that really kind of focus on the smallest detail, so that the final kind of overall thing is really fancy?
See, I think the short answer is yes. I think the detail is actually what sets you apart. But I for once want to move away from the obsession of fashion. I think it's the story. And also, when you are trying to dress a very large collection, let's say you're doing a fashion show, it's a very generic approach. But when you're doing something for a person, it's already got details about the person in. And most of our clothes, we are not a retail brand. I mean, if you go to a store, you'll see the same collection that's been with us, but all the new stuff is hidden away, in sketches and swatches. So there's a story that you have to discover it. It's an uber luxury product. It's probably one of the most expensive products out of India today, and it's makes my life difficult to grow the brand beyond a certain point, because so what we are doing is we're trying to figure out how do you take the story away from the Bandhgala, maybe Bandhgala restaurants, Bandhgala hotels, Bandhgala XYZ. So there's a whole different direction where the story is going to go, and we got invested with Reliance 4 years ago. So now it's very easy for you to access resources. Real estate, you understand, in a mall comes at half the price. So the advantage having a partner like Reliance is phenomenal. So the point is that I'm saying that the next thing is not going to be another fashion event. It'll probably be a blockchain, infused idea of a Bandhgala, which we are already doing.
This is very interesting. You just said a Bandhgala restaurant, a Bandhgala hotel. I mean, what would that be like? I mean, just to visualize.
So we are in talks with a couple of people who want us to, because we did lots of projects. We've done bed sheets with Carmichael House. We've done all these things, but that's not the area that we operate in. The products are so highly priced, and they're priced for a reason. I mean, there's 42 hours of labor that goes in. It's custom made for each person. If your hand is short or small, it has to be captured. It's not like just going and getting a thing from a store. So the idea is to bring all those values. So if you have a sofa, it'll have the herringbone, the classic herringbone men's style. The design of especially the aesthetics, the design of the place it'll reek of menswear. So these are ideas that we are toying around with. But my point is that, to me, luxury is now moving to a place where I'm talking about high-end luxury, is moving to a place where there is complete personalization. I believe yesterday it was on your channel that I saw that now boarding passes, you need to see through them, and only your entire travel plan appears on the big screens at airports. Whereas earlier we used to go through each and every airline and see what time it departs and leaves. This is part of it's happening right now. So the same technology, I'm saying that we are trying to imbibe into what we are doing through the brand. I mean, I'm not saying they're going to put chips in Bandhgalas, but the steps that we are taking are to have a very strong relationship with technology.
You were talking about Oscar. Oscar, again, you have been strongly influenced by him, and there was something that he used to say that, we just don't follow trends. I mean, there's nothing like following a trend. We'll do our own stuff. There's nothing like following a trend. So is that your style also? Like you were just saying that it's your own individual take and then carve out your own route there, rather than figuring out what a trend is.
The interactions with our customers are the trends. The trends are actually coming from your bespoke customers. I mean, we are addressing the Amir of Qatar. He's flown into Jodhpur from Qatar in a big plane just for one fitting. So
really?
You have to understand the consequence of what you're doing, because it might be 7 outfits, that's it. Duchess of York. I mean, we are not doing just Bandhgala small, outfits. There's a whole storyboard that has to be presented, and then there is a lot more fundraising for various different functions we do. So there's a purpose behind the brand, and I think the first thing I tell my team is that if there is no purpose, don't waste your time with it. And I think the purpose is that we have a RRF Foundation, which is very active in promoting the legacy of how this whole thing has come about. I mean, the safa that we wear today at every wedding was actually created by my great-grandfather in Jodhpur, Sardar Singh Sahab. And if you see the portraits today, how it was before and what it has become, it's fascinating. It hasn't evolved after that. And it's not my job to change that. But the long and short of it is that that kind of a legacy has to be explained and preserved. And I think all the clients that we have are working together to do something with that.
Are you managing to find time for your art? Because you started kind of doing art also, and like you were in France, and you had an art piece that you had got ready yourself, and it sold for a very decent price, which kind of encouraged you that, okay, this is something that I want to do and I can do. But this is something that your employees don't like. The moment you kind of get into art, that, oh, he's going to disappear again, start to do his art. Do you get time to do it now?
My first line in my contract was that Mr. Rathore doesn't go to the office, so I'm safe from that. Yes, art is a passion for me, but it's a very different kind of art. It has technology inbuilt in it, so I'm...
NFTs?
NFTs is a very small thing, but this is a little bit more complicating, and I've set up... see, the direction where we want to do is it has to have a brand affiliation. And the art needs to necessarily be more interactive in the future. So I think the brand is hosting an event in Dubai, and we're trying to see how we can bring in. So most people are buying my artwork are actually my clients and customers. So you need to understand that the value of what you're putting in the art has some value that you see when they're sitting across on a table and discussing their clothes. So it's all part of a bigger push as to how to grow the brand next.
What's your fascination with technology? You love technology. I mean, you are into high fashion, but along with it, you have an enduring passion for technology. What's that about? And like you just said that you are weaving that into your art also. But what drives that?
So it's been always my passion. I really studied it. I used to design robots and create circuits. Now, using this technology, I think bringing in the blockchain into hotels is the next thing we're working in, where we are virtually selling the hotel without any guest in it. It's sold on the metaverse, so you don't have to fill the room, which means you don't have to flush the toilet, which means there is a very sustainable model ahead of us. So the rooms are sold virtually when there is nobody visiting the hotel, and I think that's happening as we speak in Singapore, and we're working with many partners to do it. And again, the idea of my role there is to push the technology, but also to bring in the masculine touch in the interior. So when you go into this hotel, it has everything that we make. You can choose to wear a Bandhgala without really physically wearing it, and there is a cost for it. So it's moving very, very fast, and I think it's a reality that is going to be here in the next year and a half.
So you're actually taking steps into the metaverse in terms of kind of designing for clothes in the metaverse.
Yes,
virtual clothes.
Yes.
With a price tag on them there also.
Yes.
So it's going to be like beyond our reach in the metaverse too.
They don't look like the Bandhgalas you see here. Therefore, the younger, gamers, they're very different. But the point
so
is
your
that
avatar in the metaverse puts that on.
Exactly. You've said it so nicely.
Wow.
So that's the next leg of the legacy of the brand. So you can actually see a city of Jodhpur where there's lakes, which we don't have many lakes there, but you actually create a storyboard with tigers and elephants and the person going, and so it's a very fascinating side of the future. I think some of my designers are behind me in this. I mean, they take some time to figure out, but it's a great place to be, I think.
They say you should end the show just when people start enjoying it. I'm sure they're enjoying it, and we are going to end it now. So, but before we do that, I would like to ask you quickly, how are you making your kind of products and everything sustainable now? Because that's another major thrust area now, that how do I make my products sustainable, environmentally sustainable and careful? And also kind of what you're doing in Jodhpur, which is transferring knowledge also, taking it forward so that knowledge base is also transferred.
So, the thing is, in a bespoke company, you start with a sustainable, fabric comes from New Zealand, from a homegrown sheep. We buy from Xenia, which is also a partner. You get the fabric which is actually natural. So there is no fabric which is polluting anything. Yes, how you keep the sheep, what kind of, transport carries the fabric is a whole different chain. But the bespoke business is the most sustainable business because you're not in fast fashion. You're not doing what Zara is doing. They're making tons and tons of waste every year. We actually only make clothes when people want them. So it's to me, I think we are fine for now. I appreciate what has happened in France, where now every outfit will have a tag which says how much water we use for it or whatever. This is the future, and I think it's wonderful. it'll clean up a lot of fast fashion. And then the real decision is on the people who want to buy that. You have a choice.
Thank you so much, Raghavendra ji. Always
pleasure.
a pleasure hearing you.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for this wonderful conversation. And Raghavendra, may I request you to please be on stage for us. While I invite on stage Mr. Aditya Tandon, Vice President, Product and Brand Marketing, Hindi Cluster Network 18, to kindly come on stage and felicitate our esteemed guest. A huge round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Raghavendra. Thank you, Aditya. Thank you, Jyoti Kamal. Thank you, Sajita.